The best way of doing this is in a vise, so if you have one, good. So bend the two connectors down on the motor, don't break them, otherwise you'll have to get a new motor or try and make a new setup. And open the vise up, give it a bit of oil, close it up until there's about a 2 or 3 millimeter gap between the top of the worm gear and the start of the inside of the motor. Like so. I soldered 2 wires off the top of the switch, which we can then test with the motor by putting some batteries inside and see if it spins the motor, and reverse it on the switch and see if it spins the other way. So the next thing to do is to put the motor in, leaving about a 5mm gap protruding from the floor. But to get this in, you might need to just lightly file the inside, just to allow you to slide it in easier without breaking the wood. Once the motor's in, using a small bit of super glue or aldite, whatever you prefer, just dab a small bit around the edge to hold the motor in position. So it won't slide out. But not too much glue, so it will be difficult to remove if you need to replace the motor for some reason. So I've now completely soldered up the wiring, and now to test it with 2 AAA batteries. Just flip the switch and it goes. And the other way, just switch the reverser switch and it goes the other way. Now before we do anything else, it might be a good idea to paint the loco, which you could say is the final touches, but on this one, no. Now I'm going to use acrylics on mine, and it's going to be a yellow one. And these were from a pack of 3 acrylic paints for the model kit I bought, but you could use a Japlac kind of paint from International, which is enamel, or you could use Humbrol paints, which you get in these little tins like that from the model shop, and these will work just as well. I'm going to paint the underside of the loco first. This would usually be black. So I've got a fairly large brush because this isn't a detailed area, and just apply it on like I usually would. Once the painting of the underside is complete, and don't forget the back of the buffer beam, we can turn it over to paint the running plate and the front buffer, and also the back buffer and the back of the buffer beam on the back panel. I'm using a finer brush to do the top because of the closer detail that we need to get into the corners with. So if I use a bit finer brush, just give it even coat on the running plate, and also the front buffer beam, the buffer, perhaps the radiator if you want it black, and inside the cab on the floor. Okay, I've painted the running plate and the radiator and the front buffer beam and the floor and the cab. So we're ready to paint the body. So once you've got a perfectly clean brush, by cleaning it with white spirits or terps, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to paint the body with this yellow acrylic paint and give a nice even finish again. And you may want to use a couple of coats of the paint. Now the painting has been finished, we can perhaps add some detail. And on this one I'm going to add a control panel, but the control panel has got to be small enough to allow this to sit on the side so you have access to the on and off switch. Now normally you would put the battery holder on the floor, but the space inside the cab is not wide enough, so I'm going to have it upright like that. I've cut a rectangle of wood of 4.6 centimeters long by 2 centimeters wide, and stuck it inside the cab at an angle like that, and also cut a slot in the top of the panel on the left for the wires to go through, and then the battery box just slots in like that. And I've also stuck the reverse switch at the bottom for easy access through the cab door. The control panel now obviously needs some controls, so I've got some thick metal wire like that, and I'll cut about 2 centimeters off with some pliers, then bend up the ends of the wire, and here's one I made earlier, and one end will just go through a hole that we drill into the control panel, and the other end will be the actual lever itself. And there you have it, a complete control panel. All it needs now is painting. Whilst the paint dries to the control unit, you can also paint the axle boxes, or else you have to black paint out. But whilst those dry as well, we can fit the gear onto the axle. But because the axle is slightly bigger than the hole on the gear, the way we're going to fit this is to boil some water and drop that into boiling water, and that'll make it expand, allowing it to go over the axle. And if that doesn't work, it can also put the axle in the fridge to make it contract. Now the gear has been put onto the axle, it is a very firm fit because the gear has cooled down and contracted onto the axle. This means you don't need to put any glue on. Seeing as the control panel is completed, you can add some glazing to the windows. You can get clear plastic from packaging or boxing with clear windows in, and all you do is cut the piece out. Seeing as both the glazing panels have been fitted, the back of the cab can now be stuck on the end of the chassis. Now the back of the cab has been fitted, we can fit the roof. The kit is supplied with a white piece of plastic card. I happen to have some black plastic card. You could always paint the white bit black, and this will just stick on the top of the cab with some glue and hold it down with 2 rubber bands so it sticks